Okay, everybody, so I've got everything set up here. I've got my board that we talked about the last time, and I've made some changes on it. I don't know if you can see them. I've kind of darkened everything up. And also, I went ahead and did the packing tape thing. And I did the packing tape thing, remember that we talked about that, so that way there's no moisture that's lost through the board. Also, I decided to do that just so I don't have any breaks or anything in plastic that's going to be down below. I'm hoping that this is going to last, you know, for the duration of the time that it takes me to put together my sculpture, my clay sculpture. So anyways, that's kind of what I've got going on for this. And the other things that I've done is I've just darkened up these lines, and I did it underneath the packing tape, so that way it doesn't move around, it doesn't go away from any clay or anything like that rubbing on it, and it just gives me those general guidelines like we talked about. And then the other things that I've done is I went ahead and I did some photography using my cell phone, and I did it on myself. I wanted to just try it and see whether or not it'd work if I did it on my own rather than having anybody help. So I've got a very simple front view of my face, and I printed these out so that way I can have constant reference. Again, like I said, if you guys want to do this directly on your phone, that's fine. But one nice thing about printing them out, if you have a chance to do that, is that it's going to be more kind of life size essentially. And looking at the sizes that these kind of printed out, it almost looks like it's life size. Then I did myself a side view, and I tucked my beard in because I need to be able to see where that chin lies. So it looks a little bit funky. And then I just did a 3/4 view just to give me a little bit more information as I'm sculpting. So now I can actually have these in front of me. I can have them as visual reference. Again, like we've talked about before, you can actually do a like have a mirror in front of you essentially while you're doing this, and that could actually help out as well. And I might actually do that, in addition to having these photos, because one thing about photos that I want you guys to realize is that photography distorts. Mirrors do not distort. Live models do not distort. But if you take a photo of something, it actually will distort things. And the reason why it distorts is because of the lens. I'm doing most of my photography with just a straight up camera, from my phone and whatnot. So it's not going to distort a ton, but a lens has distortion. Those lenses are curved and they make things change slightly. Okay. So just something to think about. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually take a look at this and looking at kind of how this all kind of played out. I think these are just shy of life size, maybe just a 1/2 inch or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of take a look at this front view one, right? Take a look at this front view one and take a look and see what the shape is. And I'm going to show you, and it's kind of hard on me, right? Because I've got this this big poofy beard, to see where the jawline actually is, but I can kind of figure it out that it kind of moves along this line, and I know my chin is just right about here on my face. And so I'll adjust the camera so you can kind of see this from a top view as I go through and do this. But then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw this onto this portion so I can see what that outside edge should look like. So that way I know where to bring my clay to, right? That's going to give me a better idea as to getting this as lifelike as we possibly can rather than just guessing. Okay, proportions are very important. If we get our proportions right, then it looks human. It looks like a self-portrait, it looks like a face. And if our proportions are wrong, it kind of starts to stray away from that, and it starts to pull away, and it starts to look maybe a little bit more cartoony or a little bit more fake, and takes away that realism. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the camera, and then we'll get started. All right, so now we've got all this stuff here. For now, I'm going to kind of get rid of these two. I'm probably going to use the 3/4 one less than the rest, but it's at least there for my reference. So now we're going to kind of zero in on this specific one. So what I'm going to do is kind of get kind of a little bit of a sketch into what's going on here. So I know that, let's see, before what was it again? It was 10 inches, wasn't it? Yeah, about 10 inches. And here, yeah, it's just slightly smaller than life size because my chin is probably around there. And the 9-inch mark is here. Oh, I guess I'm at 10 inches there. So it's actually quite a bit smaller. It's not going to give me the best kind of case scenario here, but we're at probably about 9.5 on this. So with it being 9.5, I'm about 1.5 inches off, which is not going to give me the best kind of idea as to what I'm doing, because if I just measure this and then add 1.5 inches, guess what's going to happen, gang? Proportions are going to be a little bit off. But what we can do is we can look at this and see this is about 5 inches. So 5 inches in the width at the widest point, which is going to be right here and around the temples. You know, maybe not quite at the temples, but above in the skull. And of course, I have a unique view of being able to see just what I've got going on. So, yeah, because I don't have hair, so I can actually see the top portion of my head. Many of you guys are going to have a little bit of a problem or an issue trying to differentiate where the end of the, you know, where the top of your skull is. But let's just try and take care of that, you know, and just try and figure it out as best as we can. We don't have to be precise. One thing you can do, if you have them, is you can use something like a caliper, and that caliper you can actually lock it in and kind of get a measurement from that portion of your head as well. Or you can have somebody help you kind of from the side decide how wide your head is. And I'm just using the ruler on my own head right now, and I'm looking at it's probably around 6 1/4, whereas here it shows it as 5, right? Or maybe even around 6. Let me double check here. Yeah, probably 6 is what I've got going on. So that portion of that is pretty high up here, right? One thing I haven't done is given myself a center line, which I don't need, right? But I can just kind of guess, you know, maybe here's the center, and that's going to come down and be in the same spot down here, okay? So if you want to put a center line in, you can. But again, you know, we're not trying to be as exact as possible. I'm not asking you guys to get a caliper and actually use a caliper always to measure each part of your face. But if you have one, right, you can certainly use that. For some of the stuff, you could even maybe use a compass, right? So if you want to get like the width of the nose or something like that, you can kind of use a compass, or the width of your eyes, you know. And then in that YouTube video about the proportions of the face, we also have a little bit of insight where the guy who was doing that, he had center lines and lines that are here, you know, halfway between the middle of here, like that's where the eyes line up. So use those things to your advantage as much as you possibly can in watching that one video, okay? And if you haven't watched it yet, I strongly suggest you watch it, because it's going to give you excellent insight into all that stuff, okay? So I'm going to use just a little bit of a like a ballpoint pen here. Oh, that's not even working, so I guess I'm going to have to use a Sharpie to try and figure this kind of out. But it's okay. It's not anything that's going to be permanent. So, but I'm looking at kind of what the shape of my head is. Again, I'm going to go from that top line, right? And what did I say? About 6 inches, right? So I'm going to go to the 3 mark. I'm going to make myself a 6. And right here on the 0. And that's going to give me an idea as to how wide everything is. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Go to the 6. Go to the 0. That's going to give me an idea of how wide my head is going to be. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself this vertical line here. There. I guess we can draw in that center line now. Why wouldn't we, right? And we'll draw this one in as well. One thing to remember is if you're using a Sharpie like I am and you're doing it on a ruler, hopefully you don't mind the fact that that Sharpie is going to give yourself a permanent mark on your ruler like it did on mine. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's kind of black in that area right now, but it's no big deal, right? Everything's fine. It's a Sharpie, it'll wear off at some point in time. All right, so now what I've got is I'm going to start to kind of figure out, I'm looking here at the top portion of the head, and I can see that it's a little bit on the, not flat, but it kind of comes to a gentle crest, and then I get more of a slope as it comes down here, and then I've got a sharper turn right here as it comes down, right? So I'm going to kind of think about that as I design, you know, or as I kind of figure out what this is, and I'm using just kind of a sketchy kind of a feel to everything, and then this is where that extra turn is going to be, right? So just a little bit of a slope here, right, until it gets to that mark. Hopefully these are about in the same spot, so if they're not, I'm going to kind of adjust, right? Okay, and then as this thing, and nobody's head is perfect, right? It's not a perfect arc, so it doesn't have to be exact, right? And then this portion is going to come down this way. And then I happen to know I have a little bit of a dip right there as it comes down in, so I'm going to kind of put that in there as well. It's minor, okay? And then we're going to go into the cheeks. And then it's kind of like, I'm guessing at this point in time, and this is where maybe that mirror might come into play, okay? So remember that this right here, it's starting to kind of make sense, right? This is going to be the top of the head. The eyes are going to kind of line up right here, okay? Kind of get this down to the chin area, and then I'm just kind of feeling my chin to feel for about how kind of thick that portion of the chin is. All right, and all this is going to be, I'm going to be able to kind of adjust it once I get to everything. So we can see kind of how that works out, right? It's not exact from what this is going on, right? Because it would be more like around here, right? If we lined up the eyes, okay? And you can see that the chin, that's lower than my regular chin. This is lower than the top. So I think we're good to go in terms of where everything lines up. So now, we don't need to do anything else to this middle area, okay? One thing we may want to do is think about those other proportions that are there. This is a 3-inch line for me, so I'm going to go to the middle of that to 1.5. I'm going to do the same thing down here so I'm able to get a good measurement, because if you remember from that proportion video about the proportions of the face, what was it about where the eyes are placed? Right? It was halfway, the center of the eye is halfway between these two lines, okay? Between the center of the head and the side of the head, okay? So that's important to remember. And we want to mark that accordingly. And trust me, gang, if you do this whole mapping out of everything and try and figure everything out, it's going to help you in the long run, okay? So this, I'm just going to kind of, I don't have to do the marks all the way because I'm not going to see them, but I need to have them somewhere, right? So I can actually see this, and maybe I'll draw this portion right here. Same thing here, and I could have even done this afterwards, but because we've got a flat spot here, you know, it kind of is helpful to get them kind of done ahead of time. So anyways, we've got that. So where those meet up, right, is going to be right here, which that's going to be where your eyes go, right? So it's all starting to make sense. It's all looking like it's going to line up nicely, okay? So there we are. Now what we're going to be doing is, I've got my clay actually that's right next to me. I've got my big lump of clay. I've had it out this entire time, which is not the greatest idea, but you guys can, you know, I just wanted it ready so I didn't have to stop the video. So at this point in time, I don't necessarily need this, okay? But maybe what I want to do is have these just kind of around, okay, kind of sitting around here, so that way I have kind of some reference, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building the mass that's going to be here. And I've used that term a couple of times at this point, the mass. And what that means is that means the solid chunk that we're going to be working off of, okay? If we take a look at this side view, the profile, one thing that I want you guys to understand is that we're going to be kind of coming in probably to around there. So I'll even mark this so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. This is about how much we are actually going to see in terms of the relief, this relief head that we're going to be building. Okay, so all this part over here we don't even have to care about. Remember, we talked a little bit about the ear. See where the ear is right here. If we placed an ear on our faceplate, then we would have to make it much deeper in order to get to that ear portion. Okay, so that's one thing that I want you guys to think about, is that line that's right here. Get a little bit darker so you guys can see it a little bit better. So from here forward, take a look at what the slope of the forehead, the top of the head is, the slope of the forehead. Everybody has differences in all of these things. How far the nose sticks out from the main portion of the face, right? Look where the lips are. The lips kind of are even lower, right, than this portion of the brow in my case, okay? And you can't see it, but my chin is right underneath here, okay? This kind of goes like this, and then it extends out a little bit and then comes out this way. And then a chin is going to come back this way. I'm going to look at where kind of this portion of the jawline is. It's probably going to be somewhere around there. So that's going to kind of be my chin area right there. Okay. So you want to look at those slopes and see what those slopes are. This one right here, this is kind of extending from the nose out to the upper lip. And in my case, my upper lip kind of sticks out a little bit more than my lower lip does. Okay. So those are all things that I want you guys to kind of notice and recognize from doing this. So again, this stuff off limits, we don't need it. Okay, bam. All right, so now we're gonna start building that mass, and the way we build the mass is not in big pieces of clay, right? We want to use small pieces of clay. So what I'm gonna start to do is start taking small chunks off of this, and I'm gonna start to push them down to the board. Okay, you can see how small it is that I'm doing this stuff. Okay, so thinking about, right, looking at this one, that the furthest away I'm going to be is right here. Okay, where's the nose line up? The nose is going to be right about here. Just this is going to be where the lip lines are, and so it's just going to be a quarter of the way between here and there is where that nose is actually going to line up. So thinking about all those things, this is where it's really going to help, ladies and gentlemen, to have this 3/4 view, because this 3/4 view is going to give you those ideas of where the eye sockets are and how they all line up. But remember, we can use additive and we can use subtractive techniques. So right now what I'm going to be doing, this right here is additive. Okay, I'm adding clay. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to a time lapse so that you guys don't have to watch this. It's like watching paint dry or watching grass grow, right? You can watch me sit here and take all these little chunks and put them in there, right? But that's not going to really help you out, right? We just want to kind of see how this all goes. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and we'll see where it ends up. So now what we have here is a rough sketch, essentially, of the object that we're going to be making, the face that we're going to be making. So you can see here that there's still little lumps and bumps. I'm going to move it up here. Still lumps and bumps of where I've smushed all that stuff down, right? It's not meant to be perfect, right? And then if we look at this from a sideways view, we have our high points, the chin, the brow, the nose, right? Those are very important things. Okay, this is just a sketch of what we have going on. And many of you guys may ask me, why did I leave such a cavity there for the eyes? And the reason is because when we get to actually making the eyes, we will have to kind of cut out a socket. So I don't really pay that much attention to what the eyes look like at this point. But you know, from what we started out like, everybody is like, okay, well, it looks pretty weird that, you know, the eyes end up on that middle line, right? And you can see the eye cavity doesn't line up on that middle line. It's actually a little bit above it, okay? And that's that line is actually where the eyeball, the center of the eyeball is going to be, okay? So that's important to remember. So we've got our quick sketch of what it is that we want to do and where it is that we want to go. And remember that that entire process there was additive sculpture. That's really important to remember. So we are adding, we're modeling is the kind of phrase that we use for additive and subtractive. So we're doing this with clay, and one of the beauties of clay is that we're able to actually add and subtract when we're using clay. So right now, if there's some spot where it's a little bit too high, or if there's a spot where it's a little bit too low, I don't have to worry about it. Also, for those of you guys who have ever taken ceramics before, one thing I want to mention to you guys is that you've probably seen as I'm pushing and pulling and moving this thing together, you'll notice that I'm just smashing the clay down to itself. And that's totally fine for what it is that we're going to be doing. Once we get a little bit further along in the process, since we are going to be firing this object, we're going to be hollowing this thing out. We're going to be smoothing it and compressing it from the back side. And then we're going to do a relatively slow fire on these things once we do get them to the school and get them fired. So that's something that's important for you guys to remember if you have taken ceramics before. I know a lot of this doesn't look like normal ceramic practice, where we just take little smashes and dabs and whatnot of clay. So this is just a really good way to start building that mass and to start sketching this item out. This is kind of how we sketch things out in clay when we're modeling any kind of an object, even if it was an animal or if it was an inanimate object of any kind. This is a very, very good way to get started in our process. So the remainder of the videos are going to be me showing you specific details about how to sculpt the eye, how to sculpt the nose, how to sculpt the lips. And other than that, it's kind of going to be up to you. We'll also be going over how to smooth things out and how to kind of add little things in. And then I'm also going to be going over how to use a couple of different kinds of techniques that are involved in modeling with clay, so that we can get really sharp edges for things, because once we move to that machine portion and we start making these machine parts, or man-made or human-made parts, if you will, then what we are going to be, or what we have to do, is we have to get kind of hard edges. And soft edges are really easy to get with clay. Hard edges are a little bit more difficult to get when we're using this clay. So I'm going to show you guys some techniques and ways that we can actually make that happen. All right.